Our brain's core objective is to keep us alive, and consequently, whether we are aware of it or not, it is continuously scanning our external environment, trying to detect for any potential danger or threat. And when we feel safe, when we feel secure, we operate at a higher level. We are more conscious, we are more aware, we are more considerate. In contrast, when we feel threatened or scared, we move into the amygdala and our thinking becomes quite fixed and quite defensive as well as automated. And the more aware we are of some of these automated cognitive processes, the more likely we are to be able to observe how inaccurate our mind can actually be and bring ourselves back into a conscious way of thinking that is more benevolent, that is more generous, and that is more congruent with connection with the self and others. Now, there are several ways that you can create awareness, one of them being a contemplative practice. And for this, I normally rely on meditation. And this is basically just an opportunity to become more observant of your internal experience. So, your thoughts, your emotions, and your bodily sensations. And the more aware we are of what's going on inside of us, the more likely we are to be able to step back and be a little bit more objective, because it's understanding that just because you think it or just because you feel it does not automatically mean it is true, accurate, or beneficial. Also, creating a mindfulness practice can be so important. Just bringing yourself back into the present, bringing yourself into the body, away from the chaos in your mind, and just being in the moment as opposed to living in the future or living in the past. Journaling can be an effective tool also. It's not one that I use personally, but some people find it so helpful in putting their thoughts down on paper and being able to become a little bit more rational, a little bit more objective, and to recognize some of the thoughts, beliefs, assumptions, and expectations that we have which may not be beneficial to us or our relationship with others. So what are some of these unhelpful ways that our mind actually operates that can work against us? Well, the first one is black and white thinking, this kind of binary way that we have of looking at things, this assumption that it is all or nothing. And again, we always have to ask ourselves, what's the middle ground here? Is there a third option? Because again, when we live in an all or nothing, black or white mindset, when we're very dichotomous in our thinking, we become rigid, and it's about bringing a bit of flexibility into the way in which we see things, kind of stepping outside of our assumptions and our expectations and trying to see if there is, as I said, a middle ground or a middle way. I love the Buddhist concept of the middle way, which is basically about saying, okay, things are never as straightforward as they seem. There's always that little grey area, and the more capable we are to sit with that ambiguity as opposed to the rigid certainty that we always assume, the more likely we are to have flexibility in the way in which we engage with the world. We need to learn to register and regulate our emotions. Now, our emotions have so much of an impact on the way in which we think and the way that we behave. And without giving them the attention that they deserve, we tend to be on autopilot. We tend to be that little bit more impulsive. However, that being said, our emotions are important, but they are not always necessarily reflective of reality nor appropriate. Oftentimes, our emotions are a consequence of our past experiences. So we need to be able to meet them with compassion, but also recognize that they may not be the wisest decision maker when it comes to the action that we take or the way in which we think about situations. We're all prone to hyperbole. We're all prone to that little bit of exaggeration. But the strange thing is we have a tendency to exaggerate all of the bad stuff and really minimize the good stuff. And it's not about, I suppose, applying positive thinking to every aspect of your life, because again, that's just another form of avoidance. But it is being aware of the fact that we do tend to give more salience to negative content, to negative memories, to negative assumptions, as opposed to trying to divert our attention to what is actually good in our life. We really need to be very conscious about absorbing the good things in our life, even if they're very small and may seem insignificant. So much of our anxiety is a consequence of our relationship with control. We seem to strive on this belief that we can control so much of our circumstances, and we crave certainty, we crave guarantees. And unfortunately, with life, there are very few. And the better our relationship with that knowledge, the better our relationship with uncertainty, the less anxiety we experience. And it's about recognizing that we have a tendency to put all of our focus on external things, assuming that we can somehow control them. And that's where the anxiety comes from, instead of recognizing that what we can control in reality is really just our internal environment. It's about being able to be in touch with your emotions and your thoughts, and consequently your actions, as opposed to trying to keep all of these external plates spinning, which ultimately you actually have no control over. It's about also recognizing that you are not responsible for other people's emotions and other people's actions. You cannot control other people, nor are you helpless though. And again, this brings it back to the locus of control and recognizing what it is that you have agency over. And that is being a conscious person, living in alignment with your values and doing the things that are important to you, as opposed to focusing on other people and circumstances. We have to be really careful around the area of expectations and assumptions. Now, the way in which we expect the world to be, the predictions that we make, are based on our conditioning, based on our past experiences, based on the upbringing that we had. And it's recognizing that, again, these aren't always feasible or realistic. And the more we can understand when something is a personal expectation or assumption or prediction, and that isn't necessarily going to be the way things play out, the less disappointed we're going to feel in the long run. We have a tendency towards catastrophic thinking, assuming the worst case scenario and blaming other people. We have a tendency to point the finger. We have a tendency to assume that it's always somebody else's fault, as opposed to taking accountability for our role in our life. Not only that, we tend to take things personally. We tend to assume that everything is about us, including other people's actions and the things that they say. And oftentimes people have their own shit going on. They're very rarely thinking about you as much as you assume they are thinking about you. So it's about being able to take a step back from that and just owning your own stuff, as opposed to worrying about others. And unfortunately, one of the more negative side effects of the self-help movement has been an extreme focus on the self. I mean, we think about ourselves all of the time. And I suppose that's part and parcel of being human as well. But again, this massive emphasis on self-care has kind of had a bit of a negative spin-off, where people don't consider other people's feelings, they don't consider other people's perspectives, and that is so important. I mean, ultimately, one of the most fulfilling things that we can do is take the focus off ourselves and put the focus onto somebody else. And this isn't about becoming a doormat, this isn't about denying your needs, this is about recognizing yourself, but also recognizing that sometimes we can get so bogged down in the unfairness of life and in how hard things are for us that we forget about other people. And when we take the focus to others, when we find a way to contribute, when we find a way to connect with other people, that we do tend to feel a lot better about our lives, that we do tend to be less focused on all that is wrong and start finding the things that are right. Because again, as well, we have what is referred to as an availability bias, our assumption that the way things are now is the way things have always been and will always be. And again, this isn't always very beneficial to us. I mean, life is continuously changing. We are continuously changing. Our moods are continuously changing. Our thoughts are continuously changing. And the more fluid we are, the more capable we are of being able to challenge some of our thought processes, some of our beliefs, some of our assumptions, the more likely we are to find a way to create meaning, to create curiosity, and to become more purposeful in the choices that we make and the actions that we take. If you would like to become a little bit more aware of the way in which your internal experience works, get in touch with me on the website. It's fundamentals.ie.